Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hi, welcome back to Unbound, Season 4, Invisible Daughter. I'm Beth. In the last episode, I talked about the emotional janitor role in the sandwich generation. It's the daily grind of cleaning up emotional messes and also being pressed from multiple directions at once. Today, I'm going to talk about two things that fuel all of it and make it difficult to change. And that's the daughter's dilemma and the guilt machine. One is about the impossible choices that we face, and the other is kind of the internal system that makes those choices feel even more impossible than they already are. So imagine this moment, if you will. You receive big news, a career opportunity, an educational offer, a chance to build something you've worked towards. It would require more of your time, okay? Maybe more of your attention, maybe your geographic proximity to family needs to change. It's exactly what you've wanted. And then the phone rings, or a family member gets sick, or a crisis emerges, or the quiet, persistent pressure of expectation makes itself felt in your chest before anyone said anything. And suddenly the opportunity starts to feel overwhelming and selfish. This is the daughter's dilemma. The impossible choice between personal dreams and family duty, between the life you want to build and a life that's kind of been built around your availability. The dilemma is kind of constructed on a false binary, the idea that you have to choose between loving your family and building your own life. Maybe that personal ambition and family devotion are mutually exclusive. Maybe that the only way to prove your love is through the sacrifice of your own development. This binary is not true, but it feels true because we've been trained since childhood to measure our love by our willingness to give things up. And, I'm going to start personally here by saying I am presently struggling with this very thing, okay? I want to move out of the country I live in. There are a couple of small things that are preventing that, but there's a huge thing that's preventing it, and it's one that will hold me back, and that's my mom. I can't leave my mom behind. This is the daughter's dilemma. I can't leave my mom behind, so I have to wait until mom's gone, and I don't want to rush that by any stretch. But at the same time, I'm feeling pulled elsewhere. And so it's hard because I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions, and there's two things that I want, and then there's like this one big thing that I don't want, and that's losing my mom. So, I'm stuck in this place right now. So this, all of this that I'm talking about, I'm hoping will help me a little bit, but I'm hoping it will help you knowing that it's coming from someone who is actually living this right now. So I'm also going to tell you right now about someone I spoke with named Camille. She was accepted to a graduate program in her field. It was something she was working toward for many years. The program was in another state. It was a full-time commitment and it arrived the same week her grandfather was diagnosed with early cognitive decline, and her mom kind of started to express anxiety about managing his care, and she had hoped for Camille's help. She says, I knew what everyone expected me to do, stay local, be available, and be there for what was coming. Now, her brother had moved across the country 2 years prior for his career, and no one had suggested he reconsider. His opportunity was celebrated as something great. And now Camille says hers feels like a problem to be solved. She took the program and she paid for it, not in actual family consequences, but kind of in that low-grade emotional toll of being made to feel for years that she had chosen herself over people who needed her. She says, I achieved the goal, but I paid for it with years of guilt and a quiet understanding that good daughters don't make that choice. This is where that dilemma kind of reveals its real function, right? It isn't about the specific choice. It's about installing the belief that choosing yourself is a form of moral failure. And once that belief is in place, you carry it into every damn decision and every opportunity and every boundary that you even consider, right? Something that rarely enters these conversations is the economic reality of what daughters give up when they consistently choose family over their own development. So daughters who remain geographically close for care availability, they kind of probably often forgo career opportunities that would substantially increase their lifetime earnings. Okay. And this matters, from a young age and on, you always kind of have to plan for your future. Daughters who limit professional availability for a family crisis advance more slowly and they earn less over the course of their careers. Daughters who contribute personal financial resources to family care reduce their own capacity to build financial security as well. And the painful irony in this, a daughter who fully develops her career is often able to provide more effective family support in the long run through hiring professional care and contributing financially and building flexibility into her schedule than one who sacrificed her entire career to remain immediately available, right? The math almost always shows that the sacrifice doesn't serve the family as well as it appears to, but the dilemma isn't built on math. It's built on this moral pressure, and moral pressure is kind of harder to logic your way out of, right? So I want to talk about the system running underneath all of it, and that's the guilt machine. Some phrases that you may recognize personally. After everything we've done for you, I guess you care more about yourself than your family. Other daughters would never. Maybe if you really loved us, you would. We raised you better than this. These aren't just phrases. They're these operational commands in a system designed to maintain daughter compliance through emotional pressure, right? And they're really, really effective because they don't target a stranger. They target someone who genuinely loves the people who are delivering them. The guilt machine is installed in childhood through the lesson that daughters' value is conditional on compliance and that love flows toward them when they're useful and it gets quieter when they have needs, right? The guilt machine is the internal enforcement mechanism of that lesson. It activates when you consider prioritizing yourself. And it's the voice that says, if you do this, you're the bad one. I think the machine has these standard features like moral framing. Your choices aren't practical decisions. They're just these tests of your character. Saying no isn't a time management choice. It's just evidence of who you really are. I think there's also love management. The depth of your love is measured by your willingness to sacrifice. And more sacrifice equals more love, and any boundary equals less love, right? There's the obligation activation. So past family support becomes collateral. It's held over you as a debt to be repaid through unlimited future availability. One of the worst is the character assassination. When you resist, you become a different person in the family narrative, right? You're selfish, or you're cold, or you're changed, or you don't care anymore. I'm going to tell you about Diane. She traces her guilt machine installation to a single childhood moment. She wanted to attend a friend's birthday party instead of a family obligation, and she chose the party. She said the response wasn't anger, it was quiet disappointment. It was a withdrawal of approval and the clear message that good family members choose family. She tells me this is when I learned the equation. Personal desires equal selfishness. Family sacrifice equals goodness. The worse I felt about choosing myself, the better person I was apparently being. By adulthood, the machine was running entirely on its own. Diane no longer needed external guilt delivery. She generated it by herself automatically the moment any self-serving choice entered her mind. She said, I don't need anyone to make me feel guilty anymore. I did it to myself before anyone else had the chance. See, the machine was running on its own power in this case, right? This is the most sophisticated aspect of the guilt machine. Once it's installed, it becomes self-operating. The family doesn't have to keep activating it. You do it for them. Now, one of the most important skills daughters can develop is learning to tell the difference between guilt-based obligation and genuine care because they feel different and they lead to completely different kinds of giving, okay? So guilt-based obligation, you do the thing to make the terrible feeling stop. You say yes to avoid the consequence of no, and you sacrifice to escape the punishment of selfishness. And underneath the action, even when you do it with a smile, there is resentment because you didn't choose it. You were maneuvered into it. And genuine care, you do the things because you want to, because it aligns with your values and because you're giving from a place that has something to give. There's no resentment underneath because it was actually a choice. Now, the guilt machine blurs this deliberately, right? It makes obligation feel like love and resentment feel like evidence that you're pretty much not good enough, right? It keeps you giving more and more in search of the feeling of genuine care without ever addressing the dynamic, making the giving feel hollow. Now, I talked to Tanya. She spent 2 years in what she called a guilt detox. And she started by documenting every guilt-inducing message that she received from family members over several months. The specific phrases and the context and the emotional response that each one triggered. Then she started responding with questions rather than immediate compliance. She would say, what specifically do you need help with? And what options have you already explored? And how can we solve this together? The questions weren't unkind, she told me, but they put the problem back where it belonged, with the person who had it. Genius, really, Tanya, really. It took over a year, she said. The guilt didn't disappear, but she learned to distinguish between guilt that was accurate, telling her something genuinely needed attention, and guilt that was manufactured. It was designed to keep her available and compliant. She says, I actually provide better support now than I did when I was driven by guilt. When I help from a genuine place, I'm more present and more truly useful. The guilt-based helping was just going through the motions to escape punishment. So the daughter's dilemma and the guilt machine are not problems you can really think your way out of. Like everything else, they're these deeply embedded patterns, emotional and relational and cultural, for sure. And they took years to install and require patient, consistent work to change. What makes the work possible is exactly what we've been doing, naming it, right? Seeing it clearly and understanding that the impossible choice was constructed to feel impossible and that the guilt was engineered to keep you in place. And when you can see the machine, you have a choice about whether to let it run, right? Not perfectly, not all at once, but kind of gradually with support and practice, you start to respond to it differently. You begin to ask whether the guilt is accurate or if it's manufactured. And you begin to notice when a dilemma has been framed falsely. And you begin to consider that choosing yourself might not be the opposite of loving your family. It might be the most honest thing that you can do for all of you, right? So next episode, I'm going to look at how this whole system was built historically and culturally and why it lands so consistently on daughters rather than sons across virtually every culture on Earth. So if you've ever wondered whether this is just your family or something much bigger, this episode is your answer. Leave you with this question. The last time you felt guilty for something, was that guilt telling you something true or was it just keeping you in place? And this applies to anything outside of being an invisible daughter. Anything in life. The last time you felt guilty for something, was it telling you something true or was it keeping you in place? See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.